In this activity, we're going to practice using some different constraints and talk about when to use constraints versus dimensions, and also how to figure out what things can be fully defined. When things are fully defined, they turn black, which means they can't just kind of randomly move. We can't drag them, or they can't be moved by something else. When they're blue, those things can happen, and sometimes that can have some bad effects on our design. So the first thing we're going to do is create the outer profile of our rectangle. So we'll start a sketch. And I always tell you should start in the middle if you should always start in the origin. In this case, we're not going to, just because later on we're going to add that rule to it. So it's okay sometimes if you don't. If I was going to make this one, I would probably make a center rectangle starting at the center. But we're going to follow their directions and then see that it can turn out okay. If you don't start there, but you do need to add some kind of constraint to put it back so that everything knows how far it is from the origin. So we'll just make a rectangle. We'll make sure that the origin's inside it somewhere because we are going to want to lock into the center of that. And then it wants us to make a construction line across the center of our part. So there's the triangle that tells us that this is the center of the part. And there we go. And now we're going to sketch this shape inside here. So first we're going to add a circle with the center in the center of our construction line here. So let's hit escape. Let's turn that into a construction line because it's not going to break our profile. And we'll add a circle that locks into the center. We're going to make a rectangle above it to start making the cutout for the plug. So here's my rectangle. And then we're going to make two arcs on the left and right side of the rectangle. Now some students have used like a circle to make those arcs. Some have tried making arcs using tangent to try to get a tangent to those things. But notice that this curve is not, the center of the curve is not on the line. It's inside a little bit. So the best tool to use for that is a 3-point arc. And we're going to click the start, the end, and then somewhere in the middle. I don't want to come all the way out here. That would make it tangent. I want to just end it somewhere in that kind of area. So kind of here. Exact location doesn't really matter. And then hit escape to get out a circle tool. Click on the left, hold shift down, click on the right, and make those both into construction lines so those don't break up our profile. Now we're going to mirror the part to put the same part down on the bottom. So if you remember, mirror is under create. So we'll do mirror right here. The things that we want to mirror are those objects. The mirror line is going to be the center here, and so you can see down at the bottom, here's our other half of our outlet. And now we're going to start adding some constraints that will make this a little more like the outlet shape that you're used to. So concentric between the two arcs at the top of the outlet. So the center of this arc and the center of this arc should both be at the same place. So we'll do concentric between these two arcs. There we go. It doesn't quite look right, but that's okay. We're also going to add a vertical constraint to the center of those two arcs and this point right here. So that's kind of bring the center over closer to where it needs to be. So vertical and horizontal is right here between the center of the arcs and the center of that circle. That kind of makes those two things. It puts the center in the middle and makes the arcs on both sides the exact same size. So that fixed what we kind of messed up on the time before. And then we're going to add an equal constraint between the two arcs. So that will ensure that one isn't bigger than the other. So equal between that arc and that arc. And now you can see if we move one side, the other side moves the same. They stay the same size. If we were to drag this, everything is kind of growing and shrinking together and staying really nice and symmetric. All right, and then a coincident constraint with the origin and the center of the small circle. So I didn't start this at the center like I kind of should have. So we'll add that constraint now. Here's concentric between the center of the circle. Whoops, I had some things selected there and I forgot to hit escape. So let's undo until it gets back to the way it was. Hit escape to deselect everything, and then we'll try coincident between the center of the circle and the origin. And now everything is looking a lot closer to the shape that we really want. Notice there is still a whole bunch of blue stuff, so there's a lot of things that are not fully constrained, but it's getting closer and closer. So the rest of these, we're going to add a dimensions to give everything its actual correct size. So come over here, D for dimension. The width of the rectangle should be 70 millimeters. There we go. The height of the rectangle should be 114. Not 140, 1145. Let's try that again. 114. There we go. Notice the plugs aren't inside it, but that's okay. We're going to move those soon. The dimension of the screw hole should have a 12 millimeter diameter. So notice each time I'm clicking on it and then I'm putting that dimension down outside of the part. So it's a little easier. The only lines on the inside are either leader lines or the actual lines that are part of our design. The next one is that the bottom edge of the cutout is 11 millimeters above the center. So D for dimension, we'll click on this. Now I don't want to set the length of that right now. I want to click again to choose the distance between these two parts. That should be 11 millimeters. That looks pretty good. The cutout itself should be 28 millimeters tall. So I could click on these two lines, or I could click this one right here, and that should be 28. That's looking a lot better. And then the arcs, one of these arcs we need to give a radius, and that radius is going to be 17. And now that looks pretty similar to the shape you're probably used to seeing when you look at a wall plug. So under the self check, you should double check every line in here should be black. There shouldn't be any blue. If there's something that's blue, click on it, drag it, and see which directions it can go. If it can go up and down or sideways, or if one end moves, and that'll help you figure out like which of these constraints you missed. So I'm going to save this as plugs.